Hey guys, how are you all doing? Welcome to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Naruto lives without Kyuubi, and got harem with Kushina, sis Mito, sis Sora, sis Asami, and sis Naruto, part 2. So before we start, go check out the author of this fanfic, Alxeandersson, link is in the description, also subscribe if you enjoy the video. Let's start the story. Breakage Tower. There were lots of things. He was in his opinion a great leader, powerful fighter, the fastest ninja in all of Lightning Country, and not the best of fathers. Okay, he sucked as a father, but that was out of his control. He had better things to do than watch over a little girl. It didn't matter that she had the two tails, after all, they were in a war with Mist, and now Konoha. Just as he was thinking that a Cloud Jonin came into the room. Breakage-sama, I have news from the front. Good, I've been needing some good news. A smiled. The ninja kept quiet and held the report. The smile faded. Jonin started to sweat. And the news. Well you said you needed to hear good news, so. Just give me the damned report. The ninja handed it to him and left the office quickly. He started to scowl as he read the report. Kumo ninjas sent. 1000. Kumo losses, 798. Estimated enemy ninja. 500. Enemy ninjas seen. 1200 to 1500. Estimated enemy ninja killed, 500. Mission to kill Jiraiya of the Sannin. Failed. Mission to kill Namikaze Naruto. Failed. Mission to kill Namikaze Lars. Failed. Mission to stop Konoha forces. Failed. Details status. MIA. He calmly put the report down before softly pressing the intercom button. Can I help you, sir? The voice of A's assistant, Mabui, came from the speaker at his desk. He took a calming deep breath. I'd be here now. He yelled into the speaker on his desk. But be in Mist. And you can't be taken on me cause I'm AB, he sang as he stabbed 5 Mist ninjas at once, finishing off the squad that had come to kill him. The most unintelligent Mizukage, seating such weak people to attempt to detain me, said very clearly as pulled the last sword out of one of the dead ninjas and put it back in its sheath. I'm thinking, why can't you talk like that all the time? The great Demon Ox asked. Because, that would end my persona of being stupid, as Kumo says a dumb is a good Jinchuriki, and people wouldn't take too well to me using words that their small minds couldn't understand. Just then a Kumo Jonin jumped down. Truly incredible, B-san. The power of the 8 tails of Kumo never ceases to amaze me. You want something, Fu? He looked over angrily. He didn't like many people in his home village, and this ninja in particular was on the asshole list. Yes, the Raikage has ordered you back. He handed him the scroll. He snatched it out of his hands and went over it quickly. It read. The 2 tails were captured by Konoha forces. After some search we have concluded that it is no longer in Lightning Country. You are to report to the Raikage for reassignment. Signed, the Yondaime Raikage. Why do I have the feeling that she's better off with Konoha than with Kumo? Oh yeah, Konoha loves their Jinchuriki. He had heard about the 9 tails container, she had saved the people, and had even stolen the heart of the Hokage before he was even in the position. So she was rather well liked. He frowned and threw the scroll at the ninja's head. Tell him I ain't leaving until my job be done, son. The ninja smirked at that. He said you'd say that, so he told me to say this. You get your ungrateful ass back here and do what I say or you'll be finding a new place to sleep. Of course he was yelling it, but I don't feel like straining my voice on you. The ninja then jumped away. His frown increased. He knew that finding a new place to sleep meant he would be marked as a missing min. He then jumped off in the direction of Kumo, but stopped. Find a new place to sleep, huh? I think I can do that. He then turned around and headed for Konoha. I'd like to see his face when he finds out that I'm not coming. He grinned at the thought of his brother going berserk at hearing the news. With Lars. Naruto was walking next to his brother as Yujito was babbling non-stop for the 6th hour since this morning. She had been telling Lars everything that had happened to her in Kumo. The Kodo found out that Yujito had a very quick change of personality. Seeing as she's been talking so much since she found out she really did get to go to Konoha. And they would beat me for hours until my uncle came home and killed them. That's why I was so scared when I couldn't move until she finished. Lars let out a sigh of relief. So you weren't raped? She nodded. My uncle would have killed the whole village if that happened, she said, smiling. So B is still a good guy, huh? I wonder if I still have to kill him. Things finally started to look good for the young 2 tails container. She had met someone that was nice to her. That was not something she was used to. Well, besides her uncle, but he was so busy with the war in Mist that he never really got to spend any time with her. But enough bad news, she was going to meet Lars' family soon. That's right, Generals Mikoto, Jiraiya, Naruto, and Guy had agreed to let her go back to Konoha with Lars. They had even written letters explaining what had happened to her and how she was now under the protection of Lars Kakuzu Uzumaki Namikaze, and since he was getting leave anyway, she was going to go to Konoha with him. I'll see you in a few months, Jiraiya, and when I get back we're going to discuss this saving small people and becoming their king thing, Lars said with a smile. And after you find out how wrong you are for doubting me you'll fall into my fan club, just like everyone else. They both broke out in laughter. Well, I'll see you soon. With that, Lars turned and with Yujito, left the Konoha camp. Konoha 3 weeks later. The Hidden Leaf Village was a busy place. At the gate the guard stopped them. ID. Lars just pulled out his card and the guards went bug-eyed. And then Namikaze-sama. I didn't know you were coming back too soon, did we? No, just some leave time, nothing special, Lars said with a smile, had grabbed Yujito's hand and continued on his way to his house. I better get out of sight before anyone sees me, I don't want a repeat of my first day at the academy. He shuddered at the thought, the literal horde of fangirls that followed him around until he took to the rooftops. I'm pretty sure can't tell Minato that I'm back later. Namikaze home. Lars opened the door and heard someone in the kitchen. He dropped his bag and yelled into the house. Mom? You home? I brought a friend. He then heard someone drop something. Then start running to the door. Lars-kun, Kushina yelled as she tackled her baby boy. Erham, she repeated while hugging her son. After about 10 minutes of this, Kushina got off of him and helped him up. Wow, Mom, you look great. Lars could help but notice his mother's incredible body as she was just wearing a tank top and very small shorts. Yeah, well, with everyone gone I didn't really have much to do but work out, but who's your little friend? She gestured over to the little blonde girl. Mom, this is Yujito-chan. Yujito-chan, this is my mom, he said, introducing them. Kushina bent down to get a better look at the girl. Oh, look at you, you're so thin, let's get you something to eat, she said, lightly grabbing Yujito's hand. Are you hungry, Lars-kun? She asked with a way too sweet smile. You bet, all I've had for the past 4 years was that nasty army food. Later that day. Lars had taken off his armor and coat as they ate. Kushina gives him a worried glance every so often. Something that made him feel uneasy. Yujito had gotten tired and fell asleep, so Lars took her up to his bed and set her down. At night, Yujito-chan then gently kissed her forehead. He left the room and headed back downstairs. Once he got downstairs he saw Kushina sitting on the couch. He stopped as he found that he could smell tears. She crying? Why is she crying? Before he knew it he was sitting next to her. He was so concerned that didn't even notice that he had never moved that fast before. Mom, what's wrong? He put a hand on her shoulder as she turned to him. Sniff, I'm so sorry, Lars. She started to cry again. Lars was shocked at this. What are you talking about? You've done nothing wrong, he said, pulling her into a hug. What I did to you when you were younger, sniff, I shouldn't have, but I'm sorry, sniff, I just couldn't help myself. After he was sure she was good and satisfied with it, he pulled away. Mom, what you did to me I loved. I loved every second of it. Every day I would get up hoping I could be with you. And I was kind of hoping he could pick up where we left off, he said, looking into her violet eyes. She gave him a loving smile and hugged him. You have no idea how much better I feel, she said, now crying tears of joy. A few hours later. Kushina and Lars had moved from the couch and back into the kitchen. She had made them coffee to get everything out. If they were going to have a relationship, they would have to talk about something. After an hour of conversation, Kushina and Lars were happy that they understood each other. So Mom, anything fun happened while I was away? Lars said, looking over to her. She giggled as they both got up. You have no idea. She then walked over to him, wrapping her arms around his neck. She pulled him into a deep kiss. Her tongue slipped into his mouth as she did. After a few minutes she pulled away. You'll never guess what I found your father doing in his office a year ago, she whispered into his ear before starting to kiss his neck. Lars found no matter how old he was he never got used to how good it felt. Millimeters, and that would be. He slowly leaned his head so she would have more room. Your father, she stopped to kiss him. Hucking special Joan, and again she stopped for another kiss. Lars was enjoying the feeling of her kissing that he almost didn't hear that part. Hana Inyazuka. Lars' eyes widened at this. Kushina continued. He was so worried about me leaving him that we made a deal. I get to sleep with whoever I want and I don't go telling everyone how unfaithful he is, and you know how much Minato cares for his image. She then nipped at his collarbone. And you know who I said I was going to sleep with? She pulled away slightly. I think I can guess, but I would like to hear how you worded it. He smiled as he leaned back. I said. Flashback. Minato was panicking as he and Hana sat in front of his oddly happy wife. Look, Kushina sweetie, it was a one-time thing. I've never done this before. Hana nodded very quickly, not wanting to upset someone who could easily be the most powerful ninja alive. Kushina kept smiling. Oh, you know I don't believe that, but why should I stay with a man who would rather go and fuck some random whore rather than me? She crossed her arms and her smile increased as Minato started to pale. He didn't even want to think of how bad he would look if one of Konoha's most loved ninjas left him. After all, Kushina was hailed as a hero for what she did in the Second War. How she killed the third Tsuchikage and saved most of Konoha when Sand invaded, or how she killed the One Tails container just a few years before Naruto was born. No, it's nothing like that. We just kind of fell into it. We didn't plan it or anything. Again, all Hana could do was nod. Kushina put a finger on her chin in a thinking manner. Then an idea came to Minato. I got it. How about we just make a deal? You can sleep with whoever you want, and Kushina interrupts him. That sounds great. Well, I'll just leave you two to do your doing. She then turned and began to leave. Minato just had to ask. Kushina-chan. She turned back to him. If you don't mind me asking, who will Lars? Minato and Hana were speechless. Their son. She picked their son. Lars? But Kushina interrupted him again. Shut up, Minato, you're starting to sound like a boat, and I'm sure Lars will be a much more personal lover with it. She turned and walked away. Then flashback. By the end of the explanation, Lars was holding his sides as he rolled on the floor laughing. After a few minutes he got up. A few hours passed with Kushina and Lars finding out just how much stamina the other had. The sun started to rise by the time they were done. They panted heavily as they lay across from each other. I love you, Lars-kun, she kissed him as he wrapped his arms around her once again, pulling her close to him. I love you, Kushina. He felt weary calling her by her first name. Almost like it was unnatural. Kushina didn't seem to like that. Excuse me, young man. Didn't I raise you to show your mother respect? She looked dead serious as she asked this. I'm sorry, Mom, he sweat-dropped at her response. She then snuggled back into his arms. Let's try that again. I love you, Sachi. I love you. So he let out a small laugh at her sudden mood change. They both fell asleep in each other's arms. Later that day. Minato had just gotten home. 9 a.m. and Lars didn't even show up to check in, and he was supposed to bring me those papers to let the girl he was bring back become a citizen, he sighed as he rubbed the back of his neck, trying to ease the pain of looking down at papers all night and day. He stopped as he saw not one, but two pairs of shoes that weren't there when he left. So Lars just came home as soon as he got here, huh? He thought to himself as he walked upstairs. His and Kushina's conversation a year ago forms his mind. He never forgot seeing as Kushina didn't let him sleep in the same bed as her anymore, but sometimes he would try, only to get thrown out the window. He decided that he would try again today if she was still asleep. He opened the door to her room. Hey, Kushina. Morning, Dad. Lars sat up to see his father's face. Kushina seemed to just be waking up. She let out a yawn and looked over to Minato. What do you want? She asked. She had stated that she no longer loved him and didn't want to see him, but they didn't divorce. She had lived here for almost all her life, and it was the Uzumaki and Namika's compound, so it's not like he didn't have anywhere to go. There were plenty of rooms. What? He asked, not even sure if this was even happening. Lars looked confused. I thought you told him. Kushina nodded. I did. Minato was in shock, then fainted. Lars looked over to his mother. That reminds me, Mom, I need to talk to you about that technique I made when I was younger. Later. Lars had just finished explaining the Jungu again, only this time it wasn't theoretical. He had tried it on animals, and it worked. Now all he needed to do was make his body heal fast enough to not look stitched up. Kushina couldn't be happier. Her son's technique could work. Not some weak thing that people forget, but something that will mark him in the history books, and now she could help. Alright, so how much of the Kyuubi's chakra do you need? She asked to sip on some tea to try to calm her, but it didn't work. That's the thing. I have no way of gauging that. I suppose I would need to test it out on the animals that I've used it on. Would you be okay with that? And of course Kushina was fine with it. 1 week later. Lars was standing over a goat that no longer had black stitches. It worked. Yujito and Kushina jumped up and down with Lars as he almost completed his technique. Now to test it on myself, and once it works, you guys. Lars then started to put the seal on the ground again, and Kushina put some of the Kyuubi's chakra in it, while Lars' clone put 6 hearts in the seal. 1 for each element and 1 that didn't. Kushina didn't look worried in the slightest. Right now all she could think about was all the time she would get to spend with her baby, and Yujito was just happy to be in a place where people loved her, and if Kushina and Lars were true, then she could be immortal with them. She only knew Lars for a month or so, and Kushina for only a week, but they treated her far better than she had ever been treated before, so spending forever with them sounded great. Always loved. That sounds great. Lars then got into the seal and did more hand seals than she could count. Seal. A blue light flashed, then Lars was standing there with a faraway look on his face before he snapped out of it. Did Yujito ask? He didn't look any different. I don't know. Hold on. His shadow clone cut his arm off with a wind, and right before his area hit the ground, thick black threads came out of either part of the arm and connected and pulled the severed limb to his arm and reattached it without leaving a mark. The three were shocked. Lars was speechless. And so was Kushina. Wow, Yujito finally said what everyone was thinking. The next 5 hours were spent with the three of them celebrating their newly found immortality. The best part was that masks weren't sticking out of their backs. They just had a seal with 6 kanjis. 5 in a pentagon and 1 in the center. Top left water. Top right wind. Top fire. Bottom left earth. Bottom right thunder. And the middle Kyuubi. Things were finally turning up Lars. At the entrance to Konoha. The two Jonin were shocked when a cloud ninja with a slash through his head jumped down in front of them. Excuse me, but may I talk with your Hokage? The two looked at each other. Then back to him. We'll have to check. Lars and Kushina had once again found that the Jongu had much more of an effect than they had first thought. Did I just do that? She asked, looking at the now collapsing building. She had just meant to close that door hard to show her disapproval with the store clerk for not letting Yujito shop here. She didn't mean to completely destroy the place. Lars looked on with a smile, then started to laugh at the poor dumbus that had tried to kick Yujito out. He did, and Lars was planning on killing him later tonight, but this was way better. Wow, Kushina-san. That was amazing, Yujito said, as she sat on Lars' shoulders. I got to say mom, that was pretty brutal, Lars said, as he took Yujito off his shoulders. Kushina on the other hand was a little shocked by what she had just done. Wow, she then jumped a little and let out a squeak as she felt Lars give her firm but a hard grasp. I love it when you show how powerful you are, he whispered into her ear. He didn't care that more than a few people saw him like this. Hell, he didn't care if anyone saw him with 2 of the few people he loved. The fact that they had the same blood was not a problem. Just then two Anbu jumped down. Lars-sama. The council has summoned you, then they just disappeared. Lars sighed and turned. I'll see you guys at home, they nodded and he disappeared. Council chamber. Lars appeared inside the room. He looked around to see that all the clan heads and heirs were there. You called, he said with an annoyed expression. His father looked worried. Jiraiya-sensei was right. He doesn't even look like a ninja anymore. He was right. As Lars had gained immortality, he changed his appearance. Minato took a good look at his youngest son. Lars was now a young man with blue eyes and blonde hair that featured fringe bangs with upturned spikes in the back and a top knot in the shape of a crescent moon. He wore a patterned red kimono, decorative wide obi, and golden armor adorned with a lion, spiral designs, and clawed gauntlets, rings fastened to the collar of his kimono, and an accessory on the knot of his obi. The back of his kimono features a stylized 46 design as his clan symbol. The Namikaze clan symbol. One of the council members spoke up. Lars Namikaze. We have received reports that you have shown the ability to control threat to such a degree that you can immobilize up to 60 people with this technique. Normally we wouldn't ask our ninja how they perform their techniques, but this is a different matter. Then one of the elder council spoke up. Danzo, Lars thought as he narrowed his eyes. Yes, and we have reports that you have been able to use all 5 elements, and even now how the fuck did they find that out? I haven't even used it with someone yet. Realization came to him. Someone was spying on me. How? I would have sensed them. That got Minato's attention as well. I'm sorry Danzo-san, but I don't have such a report. Would you mind telling me how you have something that I don't? Minato didn't like to be uninformed, and he didn't like it when it was Danzo who was the person who knew. Danzo kept his stone face and replied just as calmly. One of my root ninjas saw him training and was stunned when he saw young Lars using techniques of all 5 affinities. He even saw him use some sort of black thread that came out of his body. His right arm to be precise. He even saw him use lava release, he said, as he motioned one of his hands, then the light dimmed and the recording started rolling. Lars' personal training field. Lars stood facing 3 of his clones as he went through some hand seals. The many to put down. Water release water dragon bullet. A massive water dragon came out of the ground and shot at the Lars clones. One clone made a hand seal of its own. Snake. Earth release earth spear. Once the clone said this, his skin turned much darker. He sat down bracing for impact. Another clone used a different hand seal. Ram. Wind release pressure damage. He exhaled a giant ball of wind at the water dragon. Cutting through it, but it simply rebuilt itself. Damn it, it thought, as it disabled by putting too much chakra into the attack. Another clone saw this and smiled. Tiger dragon bird. Lightning release roaring lion blue lightning crackled off his arm, then shot in a perfect beam that cut right through the water dragon. This time it stuck. His own persona proved too much for the common water one. So they want a power fight. He saw the last two clones go through the same three-hand seals. Tiger dragon bird. Lightning release roaring lion, the two clones said simultaneously, putting their arms right next to each other as they molded them together. The real Lars went through a few hand seals and took a deep breath. Bird dragon tiger. Lightning release charging lion purple lightning formed a lion around him, he then lifted his right arm and brought it down. The lightning lion then took off at the two clones, their technique fading on contact with the house-sized lion. It came crashing down on the two clones, only one escaped. Once the dust and smoke cleared, Lars could see his clone making a Rasengan. So he wants to do things that way, huh? He then focused some wind chakra into his arm and the arm detached. He pointed it in the direction of the clones and it shot forward. The clone seeing this decided to just go all out. Cancelling the Rasengan, he went through some hand seals. Dog monkey rat monkey dog. Ninjutsu interrupting cow. Just as Lars' hand would have made contact, a cow fell on his arm, effectively stopping his arm. Lars' face faulted at being caught in such a ridicule genjutsu. Why the hell did I make that again? He thought as he got up and dispelled the illusion. The Lars clone was laughing its ass off at how simply Lars' attack was stopped. He was so preoccupied that he didn't even notice Lars appeared right behind him. Monkey rat horse. Lava release melting pool. The ground around the Lars clone turned into lava and he fell in. The clone screamed as it dispelled. But that the video ended. Back with the council. The entire council looked on with amazement. A ninja that could use all elements and even combine them. That was unheard of. Lars didn't seem to like any of this. How the hell did your ninja get into my personal training ground? He almost yelled. Danzo smiled. That is not of importance, the fact that you are able to use all chakra natures, as he was interrupted by a kunai cutting his cheek. Then why don't you tell the council how you have a Sharingan in your right eye? Or about the other 10 in your arm? Lars asked angrily. They think I'll just give up how I got this powerful, then they have another thing coming. The council gasped at this. Even Danzo looked shocked. And what do you have to support this crazy notion of yours? He smiled, but then his smile faded as Lars held up a bunch of bandages. The bandages that should have been covering this eye. Anbu Minato called out, and just as he did, 15 Anbu surrounded Danzo. Take him to the holding cell, they nodded, and with a poof the Anbu and Danzo disappeared. Just because Danzo has been found out for being a traitor doesn't mean you're off the hook, Lars Minato said, giving his best tough dad face. Lars looked pissed. What happened to you made a powerful technique and it's your to use as you see fit? Lars asked, crossing his arms. Minato sighed at this. That was different. Lars, there is a difference between a B rank and being able to use all 5 elements and mixing them, Minato said, trying to sound convincing. He still thought that, but if it only not been seen he wouldn't have asked. He would rather have Lars say it himself than be ordered to. Just as Lars was about to respond, a kunai came through the window. A kunai with a piece of paper tied to it. Explosive tag. Lars thought as he jumped out the window. Just as he made it out of the room it went off. Outside. Lars landed on the roof of one of the many buildings that surrounded the Hokage Tower. Who has the balls to attack the Hokage Tower? He thought as he looked around. Did we get him? A gruff voice from behind him asked. Wait, I've heard that voice before. Little flashback. The 7-year-old Lars stood on a rock in the middle of a training field. So I were ninjas, huh? Then again, who else would be stupid enough to attack me? He crossed his arms. Kid, do you really think you stand a chance against a Jonin and a Chunin? The tallest member of the 2-man unit said as he stood up. End little flashback. I knocked him out but didn't kill him, but why the hell did the Anbu keep him alive? Lars thought as he turned to face the ninjas. They were on the building right below and to the left of the one he was on. Iwa Jounin. How are they this far into the? He then remembered that this was Konoha. He painted the entire Hokage mountain in broad daylight and they didn't even notice until he was already done. Whatever. I'll just kill them and get home and maybe have some fun with Kushina-chan. A perverted smile came to his face as he went through hand seals. Dog monkey tiger dragon rat Harem. Ice release frozen prison. The 3 Jonin were caught in a sphere of ice. Then one of them poofed out of existence. Fucking shadow clones. Dynamic is. One of the Jonin shouted as he threw some needles. Shit, I can't dodge them all. Lars quickly jumped and dodged all but one needle. Sticking him right in the shoulder. He actually started to get dizzy. He quickly went through 3 hand seals. Tiger ram dog. Wind release wind disc. Just as he said this, the Iwa ninja's head was taken off by a highly compressed wind disc. That some strong ass poison was the last thought that went through Lars' head. 3 days. Lars opened his eyes to see the familiar ceiling of the Konoha hospital. He noticed that he was now just wearing pants and nothing else. Those threads don't help against poison. Good thing I had the Kyuubi's chakra to stop it, or I would have been a corpse. He tried to sit up but found that there was a weight on body. He looked down to see Kushina lying on him. "Mom?" As he said this she looked up. "Lars?" She moved faster than Lars thought possible and hugged him. After a few minutes of crushing him she let go and now was sitting on his stomach with her legs on either side of him. "Happy to see me, huh?" Lars asked as he smiled. "So tell me what life was like in your dimension," she asked as Lars' eyes widened. "What are you talking about?" he asked worriedly. "How did she find out?" "You were talking in your sleep. About Kyuubi and some people who I know you don't like here, as if they were your closest friends. Not to mention the Kyuubi told me about something being off about you, and when she heard you talking about Uchiha Madara and Sasuke she put 2 and 2 together." She finished. "How long were you here? How much could I have said in such a short amount of time?" She giggled and tapped his nose. "You're my mate Lars-kun, I never left your side once," she said. Lars' eyes widened again. "But what about?" She was cut off by her raising a hand to his mouth. "Kyuubi never really liked him, so she never mated with him. Being a Jinchuriki means if I chose a mate Kyuubi has to agree. It not just me and my body." The two were so preoccupied with each other that they didn't even notice someone undo the seal on the door and walk in. "What the hell are you doing?" The two lovers looked over to the door to see a rather angry-looking Sora. Of course she would be the only one able to break these seals, Kushina thought as she looked over to her daughter. Lars gave her an equally angry look, making her take a step back and lose her own look. She didn't know Lars could look so pissed at her. He may love her, but interrupting his Mother's Day gift was just plain rude. "I'm giving Kas and her Mother's Day gift. I don't see you giving her one," he added with a small smile. Sora's eyes widened. "Your gift is fucking her." She didn't seem all that angry anymore. More disappointed that he was not with her. Sora looked down, her long red mane of hair covering her face. She whispered a few things neither Lars nor Kushina could hear. "What?" Lars asked, a smile returning to his face as he guessed what she said. She looked up with a look of determination. "I said I forgot to get something, and would you mind if I joined you?" she asked with a serious look. Lars looked over to his mother. "Well?" he asked playfully. He had a feeling she would say yes. And of course she nodded and kissed her youngest son. Sora walked over to the bed and, as she was about to sit down, she felt 2 strong arms wrap around her. She turned around still in the person's grasp and smiled when she came face to face with Lars. "Shadow clone," she thought as she kissed him, then broke its neck, causing it to poof out of existence. Lars gave her a questioning look. "I've waited 6 years to see you, I'm not setting for a clone," she said as she crossed her arms. He smiled and the three got repositioned on the bed. This is going to be a great night, he thought as he once again felt energized. 5 hours later. Just as the three were about to start up another round, Anbu entered the room. Lars saw him. He kneeled in front of the bed with 3 people under the covers. The 3 looked over to the Anbu. "Yes." Lars glaring at the Anbu. "Okage-sama has asked that I find you and bring you to his office. There is a mission that he believes only you can handle." Lars sighed and nodded. "I'll see him after I show and change with it." The Anbu nodded and left. Okage Tower. 6 hours later. Lars had finally gotten out of the shower and the grasp of 2 very horny redeeds. What they say about them is true, he thought as he opened the door to his father's office. "Oh yes, fuck me deeper," Minato Hana cried as he did just that. Lars was taken aback by seeing this. He couldn't help but notice the similarities between him and his father. 1. They looked very similar. 2. They love ramen with an almost cult-like following. And 3. They both were rather on the longer side, Lars more so than Minato, but it was a close race. Ahem. Lars cleared his throat and the 2 quickly got behind the desk. "Lars? What are you doing here?" a painting Minato asked as Hana tried to get her pants back up. "You called." "Don't bother, Hana-san, I won't be here long." He noticed that she was having much difficulty with the item of clothing. Hana's only response was to get behind the desk. Minato quickly got into Hokage mode. "Right. Lars, you are to go into the heart of Wind Country and find and kill Mukade." He's a Lars cut him off. "A missing ninja that is headed to the ruins of Rimran, the place that you sealed at the beginning of the war." Minato gave him a questioning look. "How do you? I was in your office a while ago and read it." "Oh. Well, since you know you will be going on a solo mission. Remember, this is a SS rank mission. I know you're ready for this," he said as he smiled at his youngest son. Lars may be doing his wife, but at least she wasn't with some ass who would just go and fuck any piece of Maya, never mind. Okay, see you when I get back, he said, as he took the mission scroll. Asuna Desert. 853 miles away from any human life. Lars jumped out of the way of the fist of a puppet as he collected chakra into his left hand, pulling his arm back. I said fuck off, he yelled as he pushed a Rasengan into the puppet, completely destroying it. The force from the technique also launched Lars into the air. He landed on one of the many broken pillars that scattered the area. What the hell is that noise? Oh yeah, explosive notes. He jumped out of the way of the blast. I knew I should have found the puppet master first. Why the hell did I just walk out there? Lars smiled to himself as he once again landed in a different pillar. I guess I'm still a lot like I used to be. He looked over to the now gaping hole in the ground. Lars' shoulders slumped. I don't have Sai to make that bird thing. Sai, I'll have to run now, he ran and jumped into the hole. The chakra blade clanged against the Hokage's hat that he had on his waist. Again he smiled, using chakra to give him a slight grip on the tower as he slid down the pillar. Flashback. Lars stood in front of his father. The Inyazuka girl had left after it turned out that Minato had a few more things to say. Lars had just finished filling some papers. Vegito is now officially part of the Namikaze clan. Congratulations Lars, you're a dad, Minato smiled. Now he has a granddaughter. Even if she was the daughter of the Reikage. Lars returned the smile, but it quickly faded as he brought more serious matters. And what about the Kumo Jinchuriki that had come here a few days ago? He asked while he admired the new blade he had gotten to fight and kill the ex-puppeteer. He will be given an evaluation and will be under strict surveillance until he has proven that he will indeed be a loyal Konoha ninja. And before you ask, no, you cannot adopt a 32-year-old man. But on to more important things. For your mission, I'll just recap. We had a spy in Sauna until he found the Kazukiya's forbidden puppetry technique, and now he plans to use Rikmyaku. So you know the Rikmyaku is a chakra that is found deep under the earth and something I sealed back when Sora was just 2. Your mother and 5 others went on a mission to stop a ninja that was using the place to enhance his peppertree technique. Unfortunately, I sealed everyone's memories of the entire event. I gave myself a note to not undo it, and I don't ever plan to, so all I can tell you is that you will be fighting someone so powerful that me, Kushina, Shibi Abiram, Choza Akamichi, Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Makoto Uchiha couldn't beat. This got Lars' attention. In his dimension, Kushina, Makoto, and the Sannin didn't go on the mission, then again almost nothing was the same here. Something else he said made Lars raise a question eyebrow. You'll need to wear some sort of ID in case you meet any other Konoha ninja. He reached into his desk and pulled out a leaf headband. No thanks, but I will take this, he said as he grabbed his father's Hokage hat. Minato looked a little shocked but smiled. Very well. Lars Namikaze, I am granting you the rank of Hokage for this mission. Lars raised an eyebrow again. Can you give people the rank of Hokage? Lars asked as he fastened the hat to his obi. I'm Hokage, I can do whatever I want. And this way you outrank anyone you meet, but keep in mind that it is just for this mission. Minato gave him the Hokage face, causing Lars to have to hold back a laugh. Just don't do anything stupid, like get yourself killed. Kushina would do unspeakably horrifying stuff to me, but stuff, he whispered the last part. Then flashback. Lars had been running for a few minutes now and was now in the Rikmyaku sealing chamber. Hey Twiggy. Get the fuck back from that sealer, so help me, I'll break you in half. Lars yelled at the thin puppet master. The very long bridge between them was of no real concern. He was sure he could make it over before any dot. A massive purple beam of light came out of the seal as Mukade absorbed the seal. Lars then took off and jumped into the light. Someplace back in time. Lars lay on the ground. Slowly came back to life as he felt one of his 6 hearts fully conjoined with him, showing him that the trip had indeed been very stressful. Now my fire heart, how the hell did Yamato survive that? He thought as he heard a girl singing in the background. The light rising above the tower. Pots boil and run high. Dragon path to be protected. Pierce with a shining blade. Look to the sky. Sand, wind marriage proud, blossoming. Lars looked around to see he was in the base of a tower. The girl's voice was echoing off the walls, making it hard to just be able to pinpoint her, so he got up and looked left to right. Bright sun, dance and flowers, and never will it die. He looked over to find that the girl that was singing was a redhead teenager in a pink shirt sitting in a broken pillar. The light flowing in spirals. Hey. The girl gasped and turned to see who had called her. Where is this place? Lars asked the girl with long red hair. Her response was to slide off the pillar and run away. Hey. Wait. He chased after her as she went down some stairs. He stopped at the doorway to see puppets aiming at him. Fuck. He got ready to deflect the kunai, but once they got to the doorway they just bounced off. Lars stepped back from this. What the hell? And to make things weirder, the puppets charged him, but once they got to the doorway, a purple sheet came over the door, and once they pushed, though, they broke to pieces. He looked back to the door to see stone walls close it. Hey. But the door was now sealed shut. I can always just break it down, but he decided to go with a less destructive option. He simply broke through the ceiling. He jumped from pillar to pillar, then to broken ledges and whatnot until he made it to the top. After breaking the glass that was in his way, he jumped out and landed on a grassy field. Making sure the hat and blade were still on his hip, he continued until he looked up. Wow, was his thought as he gazed upon the unbelievably tall buildings. I'm gonna need a better look. He then took off, jumping off the trees and buildings. He stopped when he found what he thought was some sort of cross-section. He looked around. Amazing. He turned to the sound to see 3 puppets coming his way. They landed around him. The first one punching at him with a spinning bladed hand. He easily ducked, but the energy gun that the other one had was a bit more tricky. He jumped out of the way just in time. So you want to play her off, huh? Okay. Ox Tiger, a beam of purple light shot at him. He had to stop him from moving out of the way in time. He landed on the side of a bridge. Shit, he grabbed his sight at the pane of half-molding chakra. What people didn't know about purple lighting was it was a natural chakra technique. It was a sage technique, but Lars would never admit that, but it being natural chakra meant that if you only almost use it, you're pretty much giving your chakra network blue balls. He jumped away from the robot puppets, hoping that the pain would subside. A few minutes later, Lars was officially having a bad day. Not only did the pain increase, but now there were 9 puppets after his ass. He heard a clanging noise. A chakra blade. He remembered as he looked at the hat. He quickly grabbed it and pushed normal chakra into it, making it a full-length sword. A smile came to his face as he started to cut through the chakra threads that connected them to their controller. After all 9 were disposed of, he put the blade away. He looked up to find one more puppet with his face opening up and shooting a laser at him. It shot, completely destroying the bride that he stood on, sending him into the building below. Inside the building with a new sunroof. Why do they keep shooting at me? He yelled as 10 more puppets came through the hole his body made. That's it, you've pissed me off. I'll show you why I'm the youngest Cage. Purple lightning started to come off his body. He yelled as he pointed his hand at the 10 puppets, sending a beam of pure energy into the puppets, completely melting them. Well, that was unpleasant. He then noticed a very familiar chakra. He looked over to where the 7 chakras were. He immediately recognized them. 2 of the 3 Sanin, Sensei, Ka-san, and 2 San, Makoto-chan, and someone I don't know. Time travel, he thought. He turned away from the chakra signatures. And here I thought I was going on a solo mission. He shook his head and jumped out of the building. Outside, Lars was jumping from building to building when he spotted a mass of people chanting Queen. Why the fudge not fudge, he thought as he jumped onto a building near the tower the people were surrounding. Inside. Esra, you need to address your people, it's what your mother would have wanted. The young queen nodded. Of course. Anrakyazin-sama smiled and left to get ready. Anrakyazin smirked evilly as his human puppet left. Out on the balcony, Esra waved to the people at the bottom of the massive tower until a hand came out from behind her and gave her a harsh push, sending her stumbling forward to where the platform gave way. With Lars. Am should have seen that coming. Lars jumped and caught her not even 20 feet from her falling point and jumped off to the ground. The ground. After a flawless landing, Lars felt the girl move. He looked down to see her looking back at him. Blue met red as they just looked at each other for what seemed like forever. When they both realized how close they were to each other, they slightly pulled away, a blush visible on both their faces. Finally, a cough brought them out of the moment. He set her down and a quick thank you was given and a you're welcome as well. Once Lars saw just who it was that interrupted him, expression changed. Anbu? This is a one-person mission. What are you doing here? He asked. I'll have to play the part of an unknowing time traveler. That is, if I want them to listen to me. He was right. How many ninja would just follow some guy that said he was the Hokage? The 7 Anbu looked at each other but didn't reply. State your name and rank, Lars ordered to 7 Anbu that were now in front of him. The Anbu didn't seem to want to comply. Then Lars did something that sort of terrified a few of them and startled the rest. He focused Kyuubi chakra into his eyes, making them red with black slits. Are you deaf? I gave you an order. State your name and rank. Lars decided to show a little hostility, but putting his hand on the chakra blade, more to have them see the hat than to grab the knife. He knew he could probably beat all of them with some effort. Upon seeing the hat and what they heard earlier, they put 2 and 2 together. He's the Hokage. They thought in unison. The fact that his chakra reserves were more than all 3 of the Sanin put together was also a factor. Jiraiya of the Sand and Toad mask was removed to show a 30-year-old Jiraiya. Uchiha Mikoto, Anbu, and Jonin the Raven mask were moved to show a beautiful woman in her mid-20s. Senjutsu Tsunade of the Sannin, a slug mask removed to show just a plant Tsunade. Uzumaki Kushina, Anbu, and Jonin Fox mask was removed to show a late-teens Kushina. Bright Sora would be too, she didn't retire until I was born, but damn is she hot, Lars thought, then he looked at the others. Namikaze Minato, Anbu, and Jonin Woodpecker took off his mask to show a very young Minato. Akamichi Choza, same as the rest, he said with a smile. Abu, he was cut off by Lars waving his hand. That won't be necessary. I just need to know I was in the right timeline, and I'm not, so it doesn't matter, but I have to ask, you're here for what reason? I was never told that an Anbu team was sent out to. Minato answered, to protect Queen Sora, but maybe we should be doing this in a more private place. Random tower. Lars leaned against a wall in one of the corridors in the massive tower. So you're the Rakudame Hokage, Kushina asked. Lars just nodded. He knew he could say anything and just seal their memories later. So he wasn't doing any real damage to the timeline. Everyone looked a little shocked. Jiraiya looked confused. How old are you? Lars just smiled at him. 16. Once again the Anbu members looked shocked. Makoto just had to ask. How long have you been Hokage? A while, he said with an increasing smile as he looked over to his future mother. In his last life he was Hokage for years before he died. That was a while. You know, you get even cuter when you're older, he said, making her blush. Choza cut in with an important question. But more importantly, what do we plan to do with Anrakuzen and the Rikmyaku? We can't just let him make a puppet army and take over the world. Sora seemed to have an opinion that she felt she needed to share. Anrakuzen is not an evil man. She yelled, causing the ninja to look at her. And he would never try to do such a thing, and I will not stand here and listen to your lies. She turned around and left the corridor. Lars chuckled and turned to one of the many windows. You'll find a way, Choza-sensei. As for me, my mission is to kill the missing ninja. So the Rikmyaku and puppets are your problem. He waved as he was about to jump out the window, but stopped when Kushina grabbed the back of his obi. You have some of the Kyuubi's chakra, and you have the Namikaze clan symbol on your back. Who are you? It sounded more like an order than a question, but Lars thought he might as well tell them. She let go in order to let him turn around. My name is Lars Namikaze. Now good luck. Once again he was stopped, but this time it was Minato. Here, take this. He held out a flying thunder god kunai. Lars just smiled and pulled out one of his own. You've given me a few of those. If you need me, just throw one. I'll be able to sense it. He then jumped out the window, leaving 7 very stunned Anbu in his wake. An elevator. Princess Sora was going to the top floor of the building as she thought angrily about the ninja. Lars and those ninjas don't know anything about Anrakuzen. How dare they say such things about him? The elevator stopped and Sora began walking down the hall. I shall prove Anrakuzen's innocence. Outside, Lars jumped up a building to try and find the girl. Why the hell did I jump out that window? I almost died, thought as he landed on the ledge of a building. Back with Sora. As she walked, a door opened. Someone grabbed her. Ah! She screamed as the person pulled her into a room, slamming the door behind her. The hooded person let go of her and walked over to a group of people with pitchforks. These people, so there really is someone after my life. One of the people walked over to her. Are you the real Sora? The woman asked as she looked over the girl. Sora didn't seem to like this and yelled at the woman. I am Queen Sora. If you want to kill me, at least try without sneaking around. The people raised their weapons. Give it back to us, the woman ordered. Sora had a questioning look. Give back what? She asked. I didn't take anything. If not, we don't know what we will do, the supposed leader of the group said. She was followed by chants of give it back by the people standing behind her. We're serious, the woman said as they raised their weapons again. The door opened and faster than anyone could see, Lars was in front of Sora with his chakra blade glowing. Have no fear, princess. I won't let anything happen to you, he said as the assassins started to panic. One of them covered their head saying spare me. Lars raised an eyebrow at this. Huh? He asked as he lowered the chakra sword. The lights turned on to show they were in a storage room. The people took off their hood to revile commoners. Lars just couldn't help but comment. What the hell kind of assassins show their faces? And kids? What the hell? He asked and pointed the sword at the woman in the front of the group. A fat kid walked forward. I'm Sarsi. I'm one of the bad guys. Once again Lars lowered his blade, a little shocked at their stupidity. The leader of the group spoke up. I'm sorry. My name is Masakoto, she said with a bow. We have a favor to ask of Sora. Lars couldn't help but facepalm at this kid's words. You threatened to kill someone to ask a favor. How do you say thank you? Bomb someone's house? He asked as he put away the knife. Wait, Ra interrupted Lars, what do you people want me to return? Outside a few hours later. Fireworks went off in the sky as the people celebrated something. The streets were filled with parade floats and people. Off in the shadows a manhole cover was moved. The fat kid, Sari, and Masakoto claimed first. Followed by Lars and Ra. They ran up to a wall and kneeled in the shadows. It's beautiful. Ra said as she admired the festival. Lars walked up next to her. What is? He said, looking out only to see a bunch of people partying. The parade scene from here is much more beautiful, she said as she looked on with happiness at the beautiful sight. Lars wasn't sure what to say. He never was a party person. Mostly because his last life, a party meant he was going to have to run for his life. Even after he became Hokage, they weren't out to kill him, but he still felt uneasy when there was one going on. This parade was started by Alxeandersson. It was to cheer me and the people up after my mother's sudden death. Lars didn't seem to like that, but before he could say anything Sari cut in. That's strange, Sari said as he turned back to the party. Ra looked at him angrily. What's strange? Lars asked before Ra could. The fat kid looked back at him. Everyone makes fun of Sama, calling her a puppet princess. This surprised her. Puppet princess, Ra repeated with a tone of disbelief. Masakoto smacked the boy on the back of the head. Baka, shut your mouth. The boy nodded. Masakoto turned to Ra. I am sorry, your majesty, but it is true what he said. Everyone had their family taken away one morning. Being told it was Sama's orders, Lars looked over to the red-headed princess. Damn, you ordered that. You are cold, Lars said with a small smile. I'm like you more and more, he added and put an arm around her. She turned to him. That's a lie. I never gave such a command. And unhand me he did, but still smiled. It's true, the little boy said, cutting into their little conversation. The two looked over to him. The boy continued, my father and big brother were taken away. There are rumors that there are weapons being made in the country for war. So everyone is here to beg Sama directly. Lars nodded and once again put his arm around Sarah. See, it's just like Choza sensei said. He's making a puppet army. She pushed his arm away and turned to him. That's a lie. She yelled. She continued. Then why do so many of the people welcome me? So the fat kid interrupted. No one is happy, he stated. Sarah turned to him. Then what about the people enjoying themselves? She asked. Lars' eyes widened. He pulled out his chakra blade and pushed chakra into it. 3 people drooped. He ran over to one and grabbed it and brought it over. Once he was over, he dropped it. The now identified puppet rattled as it hit the ground. They're all puppets, Sarah looked. He bent down and put his hand on the puppet, channeling chakra into it. His purple chakra mixed into its system and the thread that connected it started to glow as new chakra rebuilt its path. The chakra started to glow and followed the line. Once it got to the top, it made other lines start to glow until the entire sky over the people was glowing purple. He stood up. You see that? He pointed to the pipe that the strings were coming out of. That's it, where the puppets are being controlled. Sarah's eyes widened. The power of the Rikmyaku feeding the city is flowing in that pipe. Lars looked back to the sky. His chakra no longer runs through it. Pipes started to glow as Rikmyaku went through them. And the pipes now feed chakra to the puppets. He crossed his arms. Suddenly music started to play and the doors of the tower opened. The puppet Sarah came out. Sarah gasped at the sight. What is that? She asked, looking at the other Sarah. Lars leaned back on the wall, trying to get out of sight of the puppet guards that came out. Looks like there is a new queen and his name is Alxeandersson, Lars said with a small laugh at the end. Sarah, not wanting to believe it, shook her head. No. That's a lie. Alxeandersson-sama would never do that. She took off into the crow of puppets. Lars just shook his head. Girl's gonna get herself killed, he said as he turned to the 2 people that were with him. You know where I could get some ramen? He asked as the 2 sweat dropped. A few hours later. The puppets were starting to leave as Lars decided to follow them to find her again. Where the hell could a ramen stand be? And Sarah, he added as an afterthought. He started humming the song he heard Sarah sing the first time he woke up. After a few more minutes of walking, he heard the song again. He looked down a stairway to see Sarah sitting in front of a stained glass window of a mother holding her baby. That's the song you sang when we first met. It seems like just yesterday I was chasing you as 2 puppet guards were trying to kill me. Actually, that was this morning. Lars then sat down on a step next to her. She looked over to him. It's the song that my mother always sings. It was Alxeandersson who persuaded my mother to use the power of the Rikmyaku for the sake of the people. With my mother's control of the power of the Rikmayaku and Rakuzen technology, Raurin grew into a city with 1,000 towers in no time, but she died in the middle of fulfilling her wish. And Rakuzen was the only one with me by my side when she died. There was no one else. I was an orphan once, but I found people that wound up being closer than family, and I even found a lover that was a mother figure at one point, and even though most of them are dead, I learned something important. To never give up and to always do my best. He smiled as he continued. Even if I had to die to get to them in the first place. He looked at the glass art that glowed in the light from outside. You got something important from your mother, too. Right? He asked as he leaned closer, causing her to blush. Well, yes, he leaned in, cashing her lips with it. After the shock of getting her first kiss, she started to return it. He had saved her life twice in one day. Not to mention he was very handsome. She'd go so far as to say girl pretty, and he certainly knew how to kiss. Is that cool, mint ice? He asked as he licked his lips. She nodded and laughed a bit at his action. I wonder what she tastes like. Lars' smile changed from loving to perverted. Sarah, seeing this, couldn't help but blush some more. Lars-kun, you have to understand, I'm a princess, and your age. She was cut off. My Lars. I'm the son of the ruler of my village. The strongest village in all the elemental countries. I am pretty much the closest thing to a prince in the ninja world, and once he finished saying that, she kissed him. She seemed happy with that answer. Things got much more intimate as Sarah pushed him back on the stairs. It was uncomfortable. But by far not the most uncomfortable thing Lars had had sex on. She stopped as she was now on top of him. Lars, seeing her look of trouble, said something to ease her mind. You know, for time travel to work it has to have happened already. It didn't make sense to her, but then again, what had today? Sora stood up and looked at Lars. I must find out the truth about this city. The queen has the ability to sense the flow of the Rikmayaku. If I can confirm where the Rikmayaku of the pipe is connected to, then Lars, getting where this was going, got up. Then let's go. He had out a hand and she took it as they exited the stairway. They followed the pipes and found two other people. Masakoto and that fat kid. Where are you headed? He asked two commoners. We were looking for you, but it looks like you found us. Masakoto smiled at seeing the two. Hey, how are you calling me fat? Lars just glared at him and he shut up. We're headed to find the place where the Rikmayaku flows, Sarah told them, and they were now headed. Then Sarah and Lars looked up to the pipes. We should probably get going. Then the four of them took off with Sarah leading the way. At the exhaust pipe. They stopped at a massive collection of pipes going into the ground. This exhaust pipe is the relay point transmitting the Rikmayaku flow. Lars looked over to the two people following. If we find your family, we'll definitely rescue them. So, please wait here with your friends. Sorry seems upset. Sarah saw this. I swear on my honor, as queen, we'll save your family, the fat one nodded. Masakoto patted Sari on the back. Let's go back to the other, he nodded, and the two left. He opened the grate. Are you ready? She nodded, and they both went down to the exhaust vent. In the vent, Lars and Sarah were walking through the surprisingly big vent. Here, she said, pointing down. Lars nodded and kicked the grate. He jumped down and then caught Sarah as she followed. Sure, it is steamy here, Lars noted as they walked through it. He heard Sarah gasp. She turned him to look at the people chained to a giant wheel. By turning it, they made more and more puppets. Would you look at that? Those chains look expensive even in this dire situation, Sarah smiled at the new lover. But we should probably do something when he crosses his arms. They both looked at the situation down there. Puppet soldier, Lars stated as he looked at the literal hundreds coming out of the factory powered by Rikmayaku. Sarah looked on, stunned. I can't believe this. And Rakuzen kidnapped the citizens to create these soldiers. Lars looked over to his current favorite read. What do you think we should do? He did want to know her plan. Even if he had his own. We need to stop this immediately. She looked around, following Rikmayaku. Her eyes narrowed at one spot. Take me there, she pointed. Lars raised an eyebrow. I don't really think this is the place for that, but if you. He was stopped by Sarah smacking him on the head. No, not that. The Rikmayaku can be stopped from there, Lars oed and picked her up bridal style and jumped off to the back of the massive room to sneak around. She ran over to the square and kneeled. This is an order from the queen, stop and control the flow of the Rikmayaku. She then held her hands over the eye in the middle of it. A purple bowl around it. Loritz Io, and she pushed a ball of energy into the eye, stopping the Rikmayaku. While Lars said, as he jumped down to Sarah. That should do it, she smiled as Lars came over to her. Did you stop all of it? He asked as he looked around. She nodded, and I completely stopped the flow of the Rikmayaku directed to the factory. Lars grabbed her and kissed her hard. She was surprised at first, but returned it all the same. "You're incredible," he said as he smiled and touched his forehead to hers. She gasped as she heard the puppet start to pull the puppets together. "What?" she asked as she and Lars looked around. "What are you doing here, my queen?" A voice came from above them. A rather fat man in a robe walked onto the platform above them. "Alxeandersson," Sara yelled. Lars' eyes widened. "Wow, you got fat." Lars yelled at the presently plump puppeteer. Alxeandersson glared at the comment. Sara actually giggled a bit but quickly regained her composure. "I have stopped the flow of the Rikmayaku. I will not allow you to use this power for war." Alxeandersson didn't seem to be convinced that this was a problem. Sara continued. "I command you, as the queen, stop the production of the puppet weapons and release the people kept in prison here this instant." As she said this, one of the workers dropped dead. She didn't see this, but Lars did. "Better not tell her about that," thought as he made an "oh my" face. Alxeandersson smiled at her. "Oh, so you found out. Which means I can't let you live." Sara looked surprised. Alxeandersson continued with her stunned. "The puppet will be enough to replace you since the puppet army is already finished. I no longer need you to control Rikmayaku." To prove his point that he had puppets march forward. Lars turned to Sara. "Take everyone and run." "What?" she asked in surprise. Lars smiled. "Remember, I have to kill him first." He pointed to the missing ninja. "And don't worry. I'm the closest thing to immortal there is." He smiled as he made a hand seal and the puppets marching toward them stopped as ice encased them. He turned to Alxeandersson. "Are you really? Cause if you are, then I restate my previous comment." He cleared his throat. "Wow, you got fat," he yelled. Alxeandersson just laughed. "You, leaf ninja, told the queen some useless information. It's been 6 years since we last met." Lars just smiled. "For me it was only yesterday. I don't care if you become too fat to move and have to have puppets do things for you, I'll still kill you." Lars put out his arm and black threads came shooting out. Sara, seeing this, blushed. "Lars. This is no time to use that," she yelled very quickly, remembering their private moment and something that Lars did with those threads. Lars blushed at this and Alxeandersson didn't know what the hell they were talking about, but he started to laugh. "I had forgotten that roughneck's name. I am the Minister of Rauren, Lord Alxeandersson." Lars didn't seem to take him seriously. Some more puppets rushed at him. Lars simply held his arm with threads already out and some threads shot out and pierced the puppets. Explosion releases imploding fist. Lars just loved that explosion release didn't use fire chakra. It was so convenient. Needless to say, the puppets exploded. Alxeandersson looked surprised. "So, your threads can explode," he said with an uneasy sound in his voice. "Oh, I can do much more than that." Lars smiled as the fat puppeteer took a step back. "This is not a problem. Your little techniques won't help you. I told you I've finished the puppet army," he yelled as he sent more puppets after him and Sara. Lars, seeing them go for her, jumped in front of her. Water release opening moon with all the steam in the air, making a massive guillotine out of water to crash through all the puppets was not all that difficult. "You go through and I'll take care of the big pig over there." Sara nodded and moved through the destroyed metal soldiers. Once Lars turned to him, the parts of destroyed puppets came up around him. "Well fuck," he thought as he felt his limbs being restrained. All the puppets formed into one giant one with Lars in the stomach. Sara looked over to him. "Lars?" Sara yelled as she saw him being restrained. He tried to move, but it seemed he just couldn't move. "Well, this sucks," he said as he started to push threads all throughout it. In a few seconds he would be in control of this massive puppet. "You feel that? That puppet is draining your chakra," he smiled as he saw Lars' angry look. The fat man looked over to the stunned princess. "Stop this, Alxeandersson," Sara yelled. He smiled at her worry for the leaf ninja. He took a step and the platform he now stood on started to move. "I give you my eternal thanks, Sara-sama. You've helped to fulfill my great ambition in place of your dead mother, but you are of no use to me now. Die like your mother." He laughed at the end. Sara put together what he meant. "You killed my mother?" she yelled. "You finally figured it out. Your mother was a cunning queen. She saw through me and refused to assist me." Sara looked on the edge of tears. "You're a great puppet. Just like one of mine, but it's time to replace you with a real puppet." Lars was still running thread through the puppet. Almost, he thought, as he felt one of the arms be completely taken over. A small smile came to his face. Sara was now crying as Mukade walked to her. Lars didn't like where this was going. "Mukade, you were once a leaf ninja, have you already forgotten rule number 1? Mukade actually stopped. "What? Never betray the village. I think I'm a little past that," he added with a laugh. "No, never underestimate your opponent," he yelled as he moved the puppet's left hand. This shocked the fat puppeteer. "What is this tremendous amount of chakra?" Lars just smiled. He moved the hand of the giant metal bug-looking puppet, and much like he had done before, thick black threads shot out. Do you think they make anyone Hokage? I'm the most powerful ninja in Fire Country. He yelled as the giant hand started to glow with wind chakra as he sent a blade of chakra at him, effectively cutting him into a bunch of little bits. The puppet Lars was controlling fell to pieces. Once he touched the ground, he ran over to Sarah. He held her as she cried. "You're not a puppet." She looked up at him. She smiled as he helped her up. Thankfully, she kissed him deeply. They stopped as they heard the voice of the dead man. "I am invincible," he yelled as his body was pulled back together. He stood up and moved his hands, having Puppet stand up as he did. He laughed as he threw his own robe over himself and after a second rose up as a giant puppet spider. "Look, this is my ultimate body." "Oh my, that is one ugly bug." Lars grabbed Sarah. "I here with Sarah." He lifted up two of his legs and the feet became huge blades. He swung, but with Lars being skilled in the art of evasion, simply moving out of the way of them was not all that hard. After dodging some drills and puppets, they got to a wall. Perfect, Lars thought as he once again dodged a drill from the puppet spider's mouth. "It is useless to run," he yelled as he backed them up to a wall. Lars smiled as things went the way he had hoped. "Seal," he said as threads shot up out of the ground and held the puppet army. "What?" Mukden yelled as he was pulled to the ground. Up it started to explode, causing Lars' threads to break. Kunai with explosive tags. "What the hell?" Lars looked in the direction of the kunai. 7 ninjas jumped down. Minato landed in front of his future son. Lars let Sarah down. "You did well." Lars interrupted him with a punch to the gut. "You asshole. I can only use that technique 3 times a day. It would have crushed him and I used it twice before even coming here." Lars yelled angrily. He went back over to Sarah. He looked back to his future father. "He's your problem now. Come on Sarah, let's get the people out of here." He smiled as he talked to her. She nodded and they both went over to the imprisoned people. "Shadow clone," Lars said as he made a familiar cross shape with his hands. "Let them unchained," he ordered, and his clones got to work. Once everyone was free, Sarah talked to them. "Your families are waiting for you on the surface. Hurry, this way." She motioned for them to follow her. Lars looked over to see the Anbu weren't having a very easy time with the spider puppet. "Might as well help," Lars sighed as he charged up a Rasengan. He jumped over to Mukden and pushed the ball of chakra into the giant eye. The ball exploded and started crushing the puppet into the ground. Once it stopped, Lars jumped to where the Anbu were. "You had trouble with that." He pointed to the messed up bug puppet. The Anbu sweat dropped, but Lars' eyes widened as he turned to the crater. "Do you think you can beat me like this?" he said as he got up. Parts of the puppets coming to him to fix and make him bigger. He was now a big ant. "I told you I am invincible." They looked over to Lars. He sighed. "Do you think you are anywhere close to invincible? Maybe you never heard of me. I am Lars Kakuzu of the Jongu. I am immortal." He started to gather chakra and the ground around him started to crack, but before he started a technique, Choza put his hand on his shoulder. "Leave it to me." Lars smiled at his teacher. He cancelled his technique, he could always count on him. Lars nodded and jumped away. "Partial multi-size technique," he yelled as his fist and arm grew and he punched the ant into the ceiling. "Shibi." Minato called out to order his attack. The bug user nodded. "Secret technique, beetle sphere." A massive big shout out to the puppet and encased it. He had his chakra drained and fell to the floor, creating a crater as he did. The 7 ninja walked over to the hole. "Did we get it?" Kushina asked as they looked into the hole. Chakra strings shot out of the hill and pulled parts of puppets into the hole. "Oh no!" Makoto had to dodge a rather large mass of crushed puppets. Mukden's voice rang out. So loud that Lars and Sarah could hear it. "Allow me to show you the ultimate power of the puppet weapon. My new body." He busted out of the hole so reviled they didn't even know how to even describe it. With Lars and Sarah. People came out of the newly formed hole. Courtesy of Lars Rasengan. The fat boy from earlier saw his family. "Father. Brother." He yelled as they ran over to them. "Honey." Masakoto called out to her husband. Sari looked over to the 2 saviors. "Thank you Sarah-sama and Lars-sama." After a few seconds of greeting, the ground shook. "Everyone. Move away from here quick." The gourd erupted and the giant puppet thing came out of the ground with a bunch of reheated clones on it. Minato and the other Anbu jumped out of the hole. He looked over to Lars. "Take them out of here." Lars nodded. "Alright everyone, follow me." They followed without question. He turned to Sarah. "You too, you're the queen, they are your people." She nodded and then left to the town square. Town square. Everyone got to the center. Panting and exhausted, they made it. Lars looked around. The towers become walls of defense so that monsters will not be able to come near. Everyone took a sigh of relief until one of the towers was knocked over. People started to panic. Sarah. Sarah. He held out his hand and chakra strings came off and wrapped around her. She gasped. They pulled her up and made her start to choke herself. Shit, Lars said as he went through some hand seals. Sarah, you are useless and a stupid puppet princess. Your role here is finished. Die quietly. Just then Lars finished the head seals for his technique. Wood release great forest. He held his hands in the snake seal and wood shot out of the ground and wrapped around the giant puppet, sealing its chakra temporarily. Also breaking the strings holding Sarah. He ran up to her and caught her before she hit the ground. She coughed a few times. Lars smiled at her. You have to protect you people. He handed her his chakra blade. She nodded and took the knife. Lars looked over to the Anbu and once again they seemed to be losing. He ran off to help them. The little fight. Kushina pulled Mikoto out of the way of an energy shot. Tsunade cursed as she landed. We can't summon? She asked as she found she could not call her slug. It's the Rikmyaku. It affects all. I don't know how that Lars kid even did it. None of my seals are working either. Only pre-made ones work, Jiraiya said as he landed on a building. Mikoto went through some hand seals. Fire release great fireball. The fire didn't do much but piss off the big bug thing. Mikoto didn't look happy. Her technique seemed to be much weaker than usual. All of the sudden black thread stabbed it, pushing it back. Explosion release impacting needles where the threads priced exploded. Lars landed next to Minato. Still not stopping it. And where's Choza? He asked as he crossed his arms. As if to answer his question he heard. Multi-size technique. A giant Choza was now standing in front of the puppet. Are you really just trying to destroy it? Lars asked, not looking too impressed with his father and the team's handiwork. Minato shook his head. We are trying to find a way to destroy it. He will just keep rebuilding himself, he said as he pointed to the spot where Choza hit. It dented in but fixed itself. Lars decided that he would try to help. He took off his kimono and held his hands in the dog's seal. Separate, he said as the seal on his back started to glow. With the glowing his back started to bubble and threads started stabbing though. With a grunt of pain, 3 masks shot out of his back and started to take form. Bull mask with a massive body, a large set of horns, and a bull ring in its nose. His earth heart. This was the third biggest one. The 3 wore dog masks. The lightning heart and the smallest of them was about the size of an Akamaru. Lastly, the fish mask or water heart, the second biggest. There, that should help, Lars said as he dusted himself off and put his kimono back on. The 7 Anbu stood in awe at what had just happened. The thread monsters started shooting random jutsus at the huge puppet, being sure to make all the chakra count. But Sarah. Puppet started to walk toward the people. She turned to the people. The puppets cannot enter the room of the Rikmyaku, she yelled to the people and they followed as she led the way. Back with the fight. Every time we hurt him he just rebuilds when the lightning hits him, Jiraiya yelled in frustration. Lars finally understood why Alxeandersson was trying to kill her. She can stop the flow of all the Rikmyaku. He looked over to Minato. We have to get Sarah to the heart of the Rikmyaku's flow. She can stop it permanently, he yelled over his father. Kushina seemed to have a problem with that. But he'll just follow us when we leave, she said as she dodged an energy shot. Right before Lars was about to say something, Choza spoke up. Lars, Minato, Kushina. You 3 go and get her there, the rest of us will give you as much time as possible and don't forget you thread monster things. Lars smiled at this. Calling back the 3, he finally remembered why he favored his teacher over his real father. Don't go and die, sensei. You still have to teach me the body expansion. Right before Lars was about to jump away. He turned again. I'll see you in 20 years, he waved and jumped off. The Lost Hour final act. Every time we hurt him he just rebuilds when the lightning hits him, Jiraiya yelled in frustration. Lars finally understood why Alxeandersson was trying to kill her. She can stop the flow of Rikmyaku. He looked over to Minato. We have to get Sarah to the heart of the Rikmyaku's flow. She can stop it permanently, he yelled over to his father. Kushina seemed to have a problem with that. But he'll just follow us when we leave, she said as she dodged an energy shot. Right before Lars was about to say something, Choza spoke up. Lars, Minato, Kushina. You 3 go and get her there, the rest of us will give you as much time as possible and don't forget you thread monster things. Lars smiled at this. Calling back the 3, he finally remembered why he favored his teacher over his real father. Don't go and die, sensei. You still have to teach me the body expansion. Right before Lars was about to jump away. He turned again. I'll see you in 20 years, he waved and jumped off. But Sarah. The door won't open, Sara yelled as Lars and two Anbu jumped down. Lars walked over to his flustered lover. Mind if I try? She nodded and moved out of the way. Lars pulled his arm back and formed a purple Rasengan. He brought it forward and smashed through the door. See, not so hard, he said as Sara just smiled at him. She turned to the people. Come on, let's go, everyone follows. They ran down a ridiculously long stairway. Lars ran beside Sara. Sara-chan, we need you to seal the Rigmyaku permanently, it's the only way to stop Anrakuzen, he said as he ran alongside her. She nodded. If you can stop him long enough, then I can stop the Rigmyaku, and you would be able to kill him at the same time. Sara put together what Lars had meant. Lars gave her one of his trademark Naruto smiles. Something he hadn't done in almost 20 years. With Kushina, Minato, Lars. The three ninja looked up after feeling a shock wave. Best they got taken out or had to retreat. Looks like it's up to us, Lars said as he saw the giant form of the bug puppet as it crashed down the stairs. The future Hokage looked over to his son as he went through two-hand seals. Let's see if I can't give us some more time. Tiger snake. Would release secret technique. Nativity of a world of trees, as Lars said, this massive root shot out of the walls of the enormous staircase, wrapping Anrakuzen in a mess of trees and roots. Effectively stopping the mad puppeteer. Kushina and Minato couldn't help but be impressed by the sight of the technique. The wood release technique. How can you do that? Minato asked, looking back at Lars. His response was to give him the not the time for that face. Then Lars remembered that his father was not the best at picking up on emotions. Thankfully Kushina was. Minato-kun, I don't think now is the time for these kinds of questions, she told him while pointing up to the now thrashing puppet. The blonde Hokage rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. And after a quick right the three continued down the stairs. At the bottom of the stairwell. Lars had just jumped down the fine, a rather familiar sight. Wait, I know this place, he thought as he looked around the huge open tower. This is where I first saw that skinny little fucker. He laughed a little as this was the place he had started this mission and this is where it would end. Rigmyaku, great dragon fire, the deep voice of the puppet monster rang out as a purple light shot out at him. Fuck, Lars thought as he quickly went through a few hand seals. Snake, tiger, ram, dog. Wind release, great dome, he yelled as wind chakra spun around him in a sphere. Pushing the fire away and reflecting it back at the same time. As Lars was doing this, Sara had just finished closing the Rigmyaku. Minato, seeing this, took the shot. Shadow shuriken, he said as he threw a shuriken that multiplied into a few thousand. The rain of chakra enhanced metal easily cut through the puppet's armor. Now that the Rigmyaku no longer made it powerful, it simply fell from his body. Lars. There's his weak point. Minato yelled, pointing to the now visible ant puppet in the monster's chest. Right, Lars put his hand together. Dog. Rather than Kami, and with an upper-cutting motion, Lars launched a black and purple fireball in the shape of a fist into the puppet's chest. Anrakuzen screamed as he was burned to a crisp and, as he thrashed to try to put the fire out, he rolled into the lava like Rigmyaku that had collected in a small lake at the bottom of the tower. At last the animated terror was no more. Luckily or not, Lars had started to glow white as he was being pulled back into his own time. Lars. Sara yelled as she ran over to him. He caught her in a hug as she started to cry. He held her close and whispered something into her ear. She pulled away slightly to look at him and with all the strength she could muster, she pulled him into a deep kiss. Once the kiss had ended, Lars noticed that all the Konoha ninja were now with them. I almost forgot, he said as he reached into his tool pack. He pulled out a knife that had a red seal on it. He looked over to the 8 ninja. You can't remember any of this, he said as he threw the knife right between them. A red sphere of light ran around them. The 8 Anbu fell over with no memory of anything that had happened here. He then looked over to Sara. He put a hand on her cheek. Don't forget me, he said as he started to fade from that timeline. Now all alone with no one but herself and 8 sleeping ninja. Sara cried. I will never forget you, Lars-kun, she whispered to herself as she held the chakra blade that he had given her. Normal timeline. Lars stood outside of the ruins of a once great city. He looked up to see what time it was. 10 a.m. huh? So it's been an hour, he thought out loud. He didn't feel the need to hurry. So he sat down. An hour passed with him just sitting on the flat ground. He could easily see the sky now that the sandstorm that he was met with had gone away. Hey, a woman's voice called to him as he looked over to her. He smiled at seeing the girl's appearance. She looked to be in her early 20s, she had long blonde hair with eyes as blue as the sky and a skin tone that matched his. This was his and Sara's daughter. His smile faded as he only felt one chakra. He felt his heart sink as realization struck him. So Sara is not with. The woman in front of him looked away. Yes, my mother died when I was very little. But she asked for me to come here on this date and speak with a man named Lars, she said, as she looked away. You wouldn't happen to know anyone by that name, would you? She asked with a small frown. Now normally Lars would never lie to such a pretty girl, but with the war and the now incredible amount of money on his head, he wasn't sure he could keep her safe, as well be the father figure she needed, but then again she was already grown. Did he really have the right to put her in such a position? Lars made up his mind. Sorry, never heard of him, he said with a shrug. The girl nodded and turned away. After he was sure she was gone, he did something he hadn't done since the first time he was deployed. He cried, not like before where it was out of sadness, now it was much worse. He felt a spot in his heart get ripped open. The blonde woman he had met was his own daughter, and he couldn't tell her that, and now one of the women he loved had died. She had died years before he had even met her. But things couldn't always be what you wanted. She was his daughter, and if someone found out, then her life was in danger. He wiped away his tears and took off in the direction of Konoha. But the blonde girl. So my queen? A fat man asked as he helped her into her caravan. Just like mother said. My father would always be looking out for me. She put her hand over her heart and sighed. It's better this way, and after the war is over I'll talk to him again. Now to the land of fire. We have to meet with the Fire Lord in 3 days. She finished. Yes, Queen Kushina. With Lars. 2 days later. Lars landed in front of the gate and walked through with just a quick flash of his ID. He sighed as he walked around the village. Why is my house in the middle of Konoha? It's way too far from the gate, he thought as he continued walking, but stopped as he saw a store sign. Yamanaka Flower Shop. Maybe getting Yujito some flowers wouldn't be such a bad idea, he thought as he entered the shop. Welcome to the Yamanaka Flower Shop. How can I help? Why, hey, you Sora's brother. Lars, right? Ino asked as she leaned over the counter to get a better look at the handsome young man that had just walked into her shop. Yeah, that's me, he said as he looked at the large array of flowers. Ino, seeing that he was indeed looking for something, chose to suggest something. The violets are in season, but might I ask who and what they are for? She asked as she now stood right next to the time-traveling ninja. They are for my daughter, he said in a very serious tone. Ino's eyes widened. Your daughter? How, you're like 6 years younger than me, how could you already have a kid? She asked in a tone of disbelief. Just as he was about to enlighten her, the door opened up to let 6 people in. Well, 6 people and a dog. Lars turned to see Kiba, Shino, Hinata, Akamaru, and his brother's team. Naruto, Sasuke, and Kakashi. Lars couldn't help but smile as he noticed that Sakura had gone missing. They will never find her body, Lars thought as he recalled how he repaid the pink-haired girl. Naruto's eyes widened. Lars? Oh my Kami, we all thought you died, he said as he ran over and hugged his brother. Getting a look of confusion from Lars. What are you talking about? I was on a mission, he said as he pushed the happy Naruto off of him. Again Naruto looked shocked. Yeah, you were sent on it like 6 months ago. This was met by a look of panic by the immortal ninja. He pushed his brother out of the way and took off to his home. The Namika's home. Kushina sat on the couch with Yujito in her lap as they read a book. Hey mom, when is dad coming home? The little demon container asked as she looked straight up to see her mother figure. Kushina frowned and hugged Yujito. As if to answer the question for her, the front door was blasted open. Lars ran into the house. Hasan, Lars called into the house. Lars Kun-tu-san was heard as Lars turned to catch the 2 girls as they tackled him to the ground. You're home. In the Namika's house. As Lars was being crushed by 2 very happy women, he couldn't help but think back to the flower shop. Was that Hinata? He thought as he looked at the door. Kushina and Yujito caught the look. Something wrong? Lars looked confused and she didn't like that look on her son. I think I met Hinata in the flower shop, but I couldn't have. If I did, that would mean that the entire war was started for nothing, he said as he turned back to his family. The 2 seemed to know what he meant. And Lars, being the need-to-know kind of guy, had to ask. What? He crossed his arms. Not liking the look of I know something you don't know. Kushina smiled. That was Hanabi. She looks a lot like her sister. Lars nodded. Make scene. And with that, the mystery of what the hell? How is Hinata back was solved. A few hours later. So you went back in time and met my old team back when we were young? Kushina asked as Lars finished his tale of his most interesting mission. Yup, he said as he took a sip of his tea. Yujito took a drink of her own as she sat on Lars' lap. And? Yujito asked and led it backward. And what? He raised an eyebrow at his daughter's question. You did that thing where there is more to the story, but instead of saying it you go and look off and try to look all wise and stuff, she said as she looked up to her new father. I'll tell you when you're older, he laughed as Yujito started to pout. Would you look at the time, a new voice said as the three turned to see Minato walk in. Kushina gave him a mad look, causing Minato to flinch. Yujito looked on and after a little bit of thought asked something. Hey Tusan. If that's your Tusan and Kachan. Then how come you're with her and she's not with him? This caused Lars to laugh a bit. Pause sweetie, our family is weird like that. Now come on, it's a little too late for you to be up. This was followed by an awe of sadness from the little demon container. Again a few hours later. Lars once again found himself telling in full detail the mission. Excluding the private monuments he and Sarah had, of course. And when I came here, he finished. Minato had a thoughtful look as he digested what he had just heard. Time travel was not unheard of. There were a few times people would go missing and come back raving about the past or future, but he never looked too deeply into it. But his train of thought was interrupted by Lars. How has the war gotten along with me gone for so long? He asked with a smile. Lars didn't mean to toot his own horn, but he was a huge factor for the Leaf to keep so much of Kumo during the war. The look on Minato's face changed from happy to serious. While you were traveling through time, Konoha had lost a rather large part of lightning. Even with the help of B, and seeing as Kumo seemed to put in extra effort in trying to kill him. We had to deploy him in a different country. Minato was about to continue, but stopped as Lars glared at him. And where did you send him? Lars asked in a dangerous tone. Causing Minato and Kushina to have shivers go down their spines. I just have him in the team in Iwa. Nothing too dangerous, he said as he thought to himself. Does he really think that little of me? Minato knew that his youngest didn't hold him in the highest of regards, but what Lars was implying was just a little overboard. He decided to just bring it out into the open. Lars, I've noticed for some time now that you have been acting a bit. He was cut off by an ambush showing up in the room. Sir, the wreckage has been seen just outside of Fire Country. Minato looked shocked by the news. So he wants a rematch, huh? The guy just doesn't know when to give up. He stood up with confidence and turned. If he wants to fight, then he'll get one. Just outside of Fire Country. Two large groups of ninjas stood across from each other. One made up of Lightning Ninja and the other Leaf. Lars couldn't help but notice that almost all the clan heads and their kids were here. Minato stood in front of his army. Since the cages had decided to just come out and fight, they had their ninja pulled back to the borders. So you've come to die, Yellow Flash A yelled across the field that separated them. Minato just crossed his arms and smiled. I'm sorry A, but I couldn't hear you over how many times I've kicked your ass. A good portion of the Leaf ninjas laughed at that. Lars, who was standing next to Minato, didn't find the joke very good. It wasn't even funny. Would you shut up and just fight the guy already? Once he said it, the Raikage looked over to him. His eyes widened at the sight of the immortal Namikaze. You? He then pointed to Lars. Yes. Lars was doing his best to look uninterested. He may not be able to die, but even he felt pain, and if there was anyone who would be able to cause him pain, it was one of the 5 cages. You kidnapped my daughter. Where is she? He yelled across the field. He looked confused for a little, but then a smile came to his face. Oh. You mean my daughter? Yeah, after I met her I gave her the option to go back to Lightning or come to Konoha with me. As you can see, she chose to come with me, and then I adopted her. Hearing this made A become even more furious. Lars Namikaze. I challenge you to a fight to the death. He then took a step forward. Minato on the other hand wasn't having any of it. You came here to fight me, Rika. Lars quickly interrupted him. Father, there is no reason for you to waste your time fighting someone so weak. Please allow me to take care of this. Minato was taken aback by this. Lars had never been a very loving child, to him at least. He let out a sigh knowing that he didn't really have a say in it. He knew Lars was probably one of the few people strong enough to fight him and win. So fighting the Raikage was no real threat. Very well. In the middle of the field. Lars appeared in front of A. The younger of the two had to look up to face his opponent. A, seeing just how short Lars was compared to him, couldn't help but smile. Well, crushing a shrimp like you won't be too hard. Lars just leaned his head to the left slightly. You do know I'm 16, right? I'm normally high. And even by normal standards, you are freakishly huge. What are you, like 8 maybe 9 feet tall? He asked as he rested his hand on his hip. He didn't take the cage very seriously. His chakra is nowhere near where it was when I first met him. Why are people so weak here? Right when he thought this, he was brought into his own mind as time seemed to stop. Have you ever considered that you are just much stronger than you used to be? A deep voice was heard in his mind. Hi Whoopi. When were you able to talk to me? The monster fox's voice was all he heard. My chakra is in your back and is now flowing through all of your hearts. So it is only normal that I would be able to talk to you. It's so sad that I won't be able to physically touch you until you're in range of your mother. Lars sighed. Listen, I'm kind of about to be in a deathmatch with one of the most powerful people in the world. So could we continue this at a different time? Very well, but I must warn you. Your fight will be very disappointing. This got Lars interested. What do you mean? She giggled at his ignorance. Have you not noticed the power you have? With my chakra and all the hearts, they are much more powerful. Not to mention that you have yet to fight someone that would be a challenge. So do you really think that the Reikage will be much of a fight? I'd say that only Kushina could possibly take you on with a chance of winning, and maybe Yujito when she gets older. So don't expect too much out of this fight. Time began to go back to normal, and Lars let out another sigh. He then looked back up to the Reikage. Are we going to fight, or are you just going to admire my beautiful face all day? Right when he said that, he sidestepped a would-be punch from the now pissed off Reikage. Lars smiled, as he now had a perfect point of attack. Too slow, he whispered, as he delivered a powerful knee to A's now unguarded ribs, sending him shooting across the field, but stopped as he regained control of his body. That was quite a hit, boy. What a shame you won't be able to hit me now, he yelled, as lightning chakra started to flow around him. He then took off right at Lars. In less than a second, his fist was just an inch away from Lars' face. Right before it made contact, Lars brought up his hand and caught the fist. His feet skid across the ground as he was pushed back a few feet. A blast of air followed as Ace suddenly stopped moving. The ninja looking on were shocked. Especially the ninja from Kumo that knew firsthand how strong the Reikage was. I am possible, Ace said with disbelief in his voice. Again Lars couldn't help but smile. The smaller of the two blondes then threw the captured fist away with force enough to make the Reikage lose balance. Lars quickly delivered a punch to A's abdomen, effectively knocking the air out of him and making him bend down. Lars didn't stop his assault with that, he then pulled his arm back, then brought it back with an elbow to A's chin. This sent him flying backwards. After hitting the ground a few more times and then rolling to a stop, he started to stand up only to come face to face with the immortal Namikaze. A spin kick from Lars followed. Once it landed, the ground under A cracked and dust and bits of rock shot up. As the dust started to clear, the two fighters jumped to either side of the field. The Reikage coughed up blood and was having trouble breathing. Still standing with most of your ribs broken. You're really something, aren't you? Lars smiled at how the angry cage started to charge up his lightning armor again. You're strong, but not even you can match my strength. After a yell of anger, a dashed forward. His arm came out and flexed. He's trying to lariat me? Lars quickly thought of a way to dodge, but then a thought came to him. The young Namikaze smiled and took a stance similar to the Reikage. Lars' purple lightning covered his body. He just loved that the Reikage taught him the technique in his last life. Let's see who's stronger. He then took off at the lightning-covered cage. Within seconds, the two were already just feet apart. Lariat! They both yelled as they reached each other. Blue met purple, and a massive shock wave followed, effectively knocking down both groups of ninja. The ground around the two shattered, sending entire boulder flying. Dust shot up and only one figure was left standing. The two groups of ninja watching were speechless. The dust cleared to show Lars standing over the lifeless body of the Reikage. Reikage-sama. Several ninja from Kumo yelled at the sight of their leader. The leaf ninja stood wild-eyed at the fight. It was fast, but devastating. That wasn't so hard. Lars shook his head as he started to walk back. For some reason he felt a lot lighter. Lars. Minato yelled as he ran over to him. A few medics also came over. Said ninja just looked at him questioningly. What? Before he knew it, his father was already over to him and he had somehow ended up lying down. Dad, calm down, what's the? He stopped as he found out he could not move his arm. He looked over to it to find that his arm wasn't even there. It was ripped off by the force of the explosion. It had been severed right at the shoulder. It even destroyed his lion head guard. Medics were about to start to heal his wound when they jumped back as threads shot out of his shoulder. All the ninja watched in awe and in shock as the threads raced across the field and then shot into a pile of rubble. After a few seconds it came out again, only with the rest of Lars' arm attached to it. Once the threads withdrew, his arm seemed to stitch itself onto him, and then the thread sank into where they had stitched, making it look as if his arm had never been detached in the first place. Minato just looked at him. Lars just scratched the back of his head sheepishly. I was going to tell you about that. The Kumo ninja looked pissed. Their cage was dead, and now their village had no demon containers. They grabbed their weapons, and before they started to move, Minato turned to face them. As per mine, the Reikages and the Lords of Lightning and Fire's agreement, the war is over between us. The Kumo ninja seemed to want to fight, but then it set in. Their cage was dead, the leaf still had theirs and was unharmed. So using their better judgment, they turned around and headed back to Kumo. Three ninja carried A's body back to the Cloud Village. Minato turned to his son. You have a lot of explaining to do when we get back home. All Lars could do was nod as he along with the rest of the ninja headed back to the Leaf. Later in Konoha. It had been 2 weeks since the war with Kumo had ended and Lars along with the rest of the ninja had returned home. Walking down a rather lively street in Konoha were two rather attractive women. Both in their late teens. Some of the older ninja would have sworn that one was a younger Kushina and the other a female version of the yondaime. The blonde turned to the redhead. "Hey Mito, do you think Lars is home yet?" The redhead, now identified as Mito, turned to her twin sister. "I'm not sure, Asami. I don't sense his chakra in the village." She stopped and put a finger on her chin to emphasize she was thinking. And again, he was always very good at hiding. They decided to take to the roofs to get to the tower. "Man, it's good to be back," Asami yelled as they landed on the Hokage tower. The two jumped down and entered the building through the front door. As they walked, Mito stopped. "Are we going to tell Lars?" she asked with a worried look. Her sister stopped as well. She clenched her fist and after a deep breath turned around. "Yes, we felt more than family love toward him for some time now, and now he's old enough to make informed decisions. After all, we are in a clan, and clans do this kind of thing," they two continued on, not knowing just how much that last sentence was true. "In the Namika's house at the same time. I'll say," he said as he laughed lightly. After a minute or two of silence, Kushina spoke up. 6 times max a day, he nodded again, too tired to talk. "And Kami, we're on a bed," he thought as Kushina snuggled up next to him. He didn't even want to think of how hard it would be to get up from the floor if he had to. Later that night. Lars woke up to the sound of yelling downstairs. "Sounds like Naruto is fighting with Mito again." His eyes opened as he felt 2 chakras he hadn't felt in years. He shot up out of the bed, waking Kushina as he did this. "What's wrong, Lars-kun?" she asked with a bit of worry in her voice. He smiled at her as he pulled on some pants. Mito and Asami were all he had to say. Kushina herself shot out of bed and began getting close on to go and meet her little girls. "Downstairs. And you're just a giant puffball." Mito yelled at Naruto, who was being stomped on by Asami. "Just another normal family dinner." "Well, as good as it is to see bro getting stomped. I have to ask." The two girls to turn to the voice of the man. "Lars?" they both asked at the same time. They couldn't believe their eyes, but there he was, their little brother, just standing there in the hallway. After taking in the sight of Lars' half-naked body, they saw him outstretched his arms. "Can I get a huge form from my favorite twins?" A few seconds passed, and after the shock of seeing him passed, the two jumped on him. "Lars-kun!" they yelled as they took him to the ground. Minato had just walked in to see Naruto lying on the ground in the fetal position, his twin daughters on top of his youngest son who was only wearing pants, and his wife standing over the 3 young ones with a smile. He let out a sigh. Just a normal dinner for the Namikas. Happy ending. Thanks for watching my video, and make sure to check out the author of this fanfic, link is in the description. See you next time, till then sayonara.